morning. This is the October 31st meeting for the Virginia Beach School Board Legislative Committee. Present with me in the chambers this morning, Mrs. Rose Dyer and Mrs. Melinda Rogers, and I am Alvita Green, Chair of the Legislative Committee. May I get a motion for the adoption of today's agenda?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
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 All right, you received the minutes for review. May I have a motion to adopt our minutes from our last meeting of October 3rd, 2025?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All right, the ayes have it. Moving to the next item on the agenda for old business. Thank you, Ms. Matheson, for making sure, helping us coordinate our legislative breakfast for our General Assembly and Delegation, which will be on December 4th, 2025. And I know we're still waiting to confirm the location, or has the location been confirmed?
Location has been confirmed. We will be having it at Bayside High School. Troy is graciously welcoming us and sent me pictures of where we are going to meet. I sent the invitation to you to approve, so once you have approved the invitation, I'll send it out to all the delegates and to the board.
All right, thank you.
8:30. It'll be
Yes.
8:30.
On December 4th. And I will do that after today's meeting.
Perfect.
So thank you very
No
much.
problem.
Because I know you've put a lot of time into that. And I appreciate Mr. Walton allowing us to have it at Bayside High School. Committee members, any questions, Ms. Dyer or Ms. Rogers, with regards to the December 4th Legislative Committee?
Just looking forward to seeing the delegates and everyone. Are we having the students then be a part of that as far as like the breakfast, serving it and all of that, or they're not?
So most of the time, what we've done is, the first year I was here, we had it at, that was last year. The first year we had it, oh my gosh. Renaissance, thank you. And we just had our breakfast first and met with the delegates, and then, they went on a tour. And that's kind of where the kids got involved a little bit, whereas last year they were serving and that kind of thing, since it was at the Tech Center. So this year it'll be the same kind of setup as how it was at Renaissance, where they will see them when they start moving around and touring and that kind of thing.
All right, thanks.
What was that? Oh, I am sorry. I'm sorry, Ms. Dyer. Okay. So, any other questions? We're good on the legislative breakfast? Yes. All right. So, any other items under old business? So, Ms. Linetti, correct me if I'm wrong, is this where we resume our discussion for the legislative update, or do we take that to new business?
Next one you have new business, oh goodness, no, we didn't write that on there. You did the VSBA legislative agenda,
Yes.
that went through the school board Tuesday night, and so that'll go on for approval, and then that'll go to Mr. Culpepper or someone on his behalf will take care of that, in a couple weeks at the VSBA. So actually, we probably need to, I'm thinking we should have had I didn't look at this earlier, probably need to add a B of 5B, new business and legislative agenda 2026. Because it could have been under old business too, sorry.
All right, so may I have a motion for us to amend today's agenda to add that?
Motion moved.
Second.
All right.
My issue was just about collective bargaining, but we are going to vote on it on the 10th as far as this agenda packet. It's my understanding, you know, the way it was presented at the last board meeting.
I'm sorry, are you saying you want to talk about adding that to this agenda? And
So I think it should be open for discussion, yes.
The position that
Yes.
the school board wants to take on that.
Yes.
I will say, at least what I know, and this is probably where Mr. Andrews would be more useful. At the June meeting, the Council of School Attorneys was mentioning that they had done a lot of work last year on collective bargaining. It did not go through, but it is structured. There's a lot out. There's a whole lot of work been done on that. Kind of will probably depend on the results of the election. We do need to keep an eye on that because there's a lot of work been done on that, and that could switch quickly for us. And we just have to keep an eye on where that's going.
All right, so back to the original motion to add a 5B for the discussion with our upcoming legislative packet.
Yeah, I moved to that and she seconded it. We just
Okay.
didn't vote.
All right, thank you. And all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All right, so we have added that. All right, any other items under, the?
Did you want to talk about the proposed legislative agenda? Anna, can we pull that up on screen? I know I made just a couple changes on it yesterday, nothing significant. Were we okay with the wording on this, or did you want to?
Right,
go
I
on?
was going to, that was gonna be the next item
Okay.
after we got through the VSBA. Okay, so, as Ms. Linetti indicated, we have, already started the discussions with that with our colleagues at our past board meeting, and, we will, on November 10th, vote, what will go forth for, Mr. Culpepper to represent our school board with regards to the VSBA legislative agenda.
So I have a question. If we're bringing up business that failed here, we can still bring it up November 10th? Is this,
On the VSBA legislative agenda, or the 2026 school board legislative agenda? Either way, what you had for information was the VSBA legislative agenda. If there's still matters you want to talk about, you would just move to amend or change it before you went to a vote for the legislative agenda on those items. There wasn't a whole lot of discussion on the VSBA legislative agenda items, but you're free when it comes up on action. Just make sure I haven't seen what it went to agenda planning. Make sure if it goes to consent and you want to change it, we move it back to action if you want to change anything. And if it's on action, you're fine, you can amend it or offer alternatives. I would suggest, because those sometimes are a little bit harder to read, if you know you want to change the language, if you could send it to your colleagues ahead of time. Because sometimes when you're sitting on the dais with everything else going, those VSBA propositions are kind of hard to read because they're not well written.
Right.
So if you're going to offer language, you want to send it to them ahead of time so they know what you're going to move. That would be easier.
okay, thanks.
All right, anything else before we move on to the current, upcoming legislative, agenda? All right. Mr. Andrus, I'm gonna ask that you kind of guide us through this document, since you were instrumental in helping us develop it. I would assume we may need you to be on camera with the mic. Thank you.
Good morning.
Right.
Thank you. So I think what we have before you is the draft legislative agenda that was developed based upon previous legislative agendas, as well as the discussions we've had over the last couple of months at our legislative committee meetings. I think, as you'll see in the agenda, there's a lot of familiar items that we've been talking about for several years now. Obviously, things where we have accomplished or moved the needle significantly on. Some of those things have fallen off just because there will probably not be as high priorities, such as support cap and some of the seat time flexibility, things like that we've been able to move recently. So, like I said, a lot of these things will sound familiar with a couple of kind of newer things, but I'll be happy to kind of walk through some of these and open it up for any discussions or questions that you all might have. As we've talked about this year, as with every new biennial budget, the General Assembly re-benchmarks the cost of public education in Virginia. So that process is beginning now. We'll probably get re-benchmarking numbers usually sometime between now and the end of the year, which will go into the next biennial budget. One of the things that we always have sometimes concerns about, certainly when state revenue streams might be constrained, is making sure that the General Assembly does fully fund the cost of re-benchmarking. So as you'll see in item 1, it's making sure that we fully fund re-benchmarking for public education in the next biennium. So that is probably one of our top priorities heading into this coming session. And I'm not going to probably, unless you want me to, I'm not going to read through all of these, but I'll just kind of hit the highlights of these and certainly answer any questions. Following that, teacher recruitment and retention continues to be a challenge, both on the salary side as well on just making sure that we have set up appropriate supports, making sure that we are not putting undue burdens on our teachers from any type of legislative policies, those types of things. So again, this is language that we have generally had in the past. Moving on to the next page, increase supports for mental health and behavioral health. The General Assembly has done some work on this before in the past couple of years. Again, I think there's a lot more work to be done on this. We continue to see challenges in our school divisions, not only I think in Virginia Beach, but across the Commonwealth in that respect. Special education remains a significant challenge for Virginia Beach as well as every school division. And as a reminder, the Commission on Youth, as we've talked about several times already, has worked on their study with a number of recommendations that will potentially come before the General Assembly the 2026 session. As Ms. Linetti and I both noted, the recommendations coming out of the Commission on Youth, I think, are pretty good for the most part, without putting a lot of undue burdens on school divisions, a lot of training, some things like that. Again, an issue we'll have to watch very, very closely this coming session in terms of making sure that those policies that are proposed and potentially acted on are supportive of our efforts to make sure that every child in Virginia Beach receives a free and appropriate education. Moving towards dedicated funding for capital improvements. I know that is always a hot topic with every budget, and making sure that the General Assembly is certainly well aware of the challenges that we have and that we face with capital improvements. We've seen legislation on this in years past. We've seen some dollars put into it, but quite frankly, the price tag for capital improvements across the Commonwealth is pretty significant. But that's something that we will continue to work on and push.
I added a line to this. Last year's General Assembly, a sort of a tricky move. They formed a committee and they asked that every school division do a survey of, I'm going to call it your ADA violations, where you were deficient in ADA accessibility, and turn into the General Assembly by November 1st. And quite honestly, the council school attorneys are like, are you crazy? I mean, why would we list all our violations and hand it to you so somebody could sue it? So we've been working on it. It got very confusing because there's very little direction given to school divisions to do this, and people are scrambling, trying to figure out what to do. Most school divisions kind of came up with a standard format, like a 4-page presentation. Here's what we do in ADA. We follow the code. We keep monitoring this. We looked at it, but we did not turn in, and to my knowledge, most of the school divisions are not turning in. Here's a list of every doorknob that's not at the right height, everything that's not the exact percentage angle that needs to be at. And so there's a possibility that this committee will then turn in and say, well, wait a minute, we wanted a list of violations. And I reason to believe, based on some of the people in the General Assembly who were working on some other issues we were involved in last year, that there might be some interest in doing this. So I added a line to this that says VBCPS requests the General Assembly include funding to support any accessibility findings and recommendations. And this comes out of House Bill 2278, 2025. We said in our letter we're sending it today, I think we put in Dr. Robinson's desk to sign, we don't really know what this committee is going to do. ADA, to do everything that everybody would want would be prohibitively expensive. We already don't have, how limited our CIP budget is. If we were to make every baseball field, have a full cement walkway, all the things you would have it, fix every bleacher, do everything that isn't inside a building, that is itself cost prohibitive. So we're a little concerned that they're going to ask us to come up to date on stuff, whereas we're not currently required to do it. It's only when we renovate a building, we then have to bring it up to code. And so we just need to kind of keep an eye on that. So my concern was, I'm not really sure what this committee's intent to do this. The Council of School Attorneys is very concerned about what their intent is to do. So we gotta just keep an eye on that, because I can't just say do this because we don't have the funding. We can't build and maintain our own buildings that are currently on our list on the CIP. We can't go doing extra projects right now unless they give us some funding. So that's why that's in there.
And one more thing I would add to that was, one of the odd things about this particular piece of legislation that did pass last year is normally the reports go to the Department of Ed and they kind of receive all the reports, create something and send it off to the appropriate policymakers. Which was a little bit odd about this is that the reports all went directly to the chair of the House Education Committee and the chair of the Senate Education and Health Committee, which was a little bit odd this year. And so instead of sending them to DOE or having a portal that you might submit information through, all school divisions, all 132 school divisions are sending individual reports to the chairs of the committees, which is a little unusual. But that might have been just a structure of how the legislation was drafted versus anything more than that. But that is something, to Ms. Linetti's point, that we'll probably need to be keeping an eye on, of whether there's anything coming out of those reports. But those are all due November 1. So those are been submitted slowly over the last couple of weeks. Talking with members, I think those have been slowly rolling in, and we'll see if there's anything that comes of those.
So today is today, or is it Monday, since November 1st falls on a Saturday?
It's Monday, but we'll put ours in today. And they're actually literally, if you go on the General Assembly website where they have committee stuff, they're posting whatever letter you put.
Okay.
There's something very just unusual about this one that caught our attention. It was kind of one of these sleeper bills that we were all working on, and we're just not quite sure what the intent is. I'm not sure it's a nefarious intent. It's just a potential that you may not understand the sheer cost of what you might be asking us to do when we already have our own CIP programs. And again, we're all struggling with CIP to fund what we need to fund, and, we're not against this. We believe we're in compliance with the current building codes, and we do monitor and we update as necessary. It is not unusual for us at the U.S. Department of Education to have to go through one of these evaluations on certain schools, and we enter into agreements to do that. We work very closely with our Parks and Rec folks on our Parks and Recreation grounds, and they help us fund for some of that. So it's not like we're non-compliant, it's just we don't necessarily bring up to the current state. We stay where we're required to be at law, and then as we build, we bring it up to code when we need to.
I'm sorry, one thing, I'm gonna go back to the special ed real quick, just because you see some blanks in there. We update those numbers and percentages every year based upon real, and so I'll work with Ms. Matheson to make sure that we get those updated for the full presentation for the board, so.
And, so you'll be using last December's child count numbers probably for it, because we don't have them yet for this
Yeah,
year.
I think we use whatever the latest
Yeah,
number
it'll
set
be
that we have.
December 2024 numbers, because they will not have this year's yet.
Yeah, I think that's probably, yes.
Okay.
And Mr. Anderson, I don't know if you're getting the same impression I am. I'm like, there's been a lot of work for a couple of years, and I think I get the feeling they're over it. Like, this is it. We don't come bother us about parent advocates anymore, that they're kind of tired of this. So I think this may be the last round we see of significant changes for a little while in the special ed realm. I think they're kind of tired of putting the effort into this. It's a difficult subject, so I think this will be the final round for it, and then probably turn over to the Virginia Department of Education.
That's right. As you can imagine, special education, everyone feels very passionately about on both sides, rightfully so. So it is difficult conversations to have. Moving down to continued authorization for the recovery school. This is not necessarily a new item, but new to our legislative agenda. As you all well know, we received money from the General Assembly to begin a regional recovery school. What was unique about the recovery school that we established in Hampton Roads is that we set up a real regional model. And other schools that have set up recovery schools in Virginia have established recovery schools within an individual school and then allow school divisions in that region to send students to that recovery school. So that's the model that we've seen. We took a slightly different approach where we set up a very collaborative regional model where it is a true partnership between the school divisions and Hampton Roads. Because we did it that way, we've encountered a few challenges based upon how the current structure of regional schools works. And there are very specific things that you can set up regional schools for. Recovery schools is not exactly enumerated in that statute. We do have authorization to do it through the current budget act because it specifically says that we can set up a regional school, which gives us the authorization. So what we want to do is make sure that that authorization continues on and that there's no confusion in the future about what we are doing here in Hampton Roads, because I think it is a great program. I think it's a great model. And it seems to be working well. We just want to make sure that there's no confusion in the future on that.
Angel, this is just for authorization. It does not include funding,
We
correct?
are not requesting any additional funding at this time. This is only for the authorization. That is correct.
Okay, thank you.
So we're only funded for the year, that year, so how do they,
That's not quite true. We have since that time period gone and gotten numerous grants from the Virginia Opioid Abatement Authority. Dr. Saltner was working a lot of this, and that was actually part of the reason we went with the regional concept. We leveraged the five of the Region 2 school districts to go access their ability to get into these grant funds that are given to they aren't given to school boards, they're given to the localities, the counties or cities. So we have a funding model that we have money left over from the original grant. And of course, if they want to give us more money, I'm sure we'd be happy to take it. So that'd be terrific. And they have a history of doing that. They've done that with Chesterfield to do that. It was just they gave us a 2-year authorization, which will expire in June 2026. We have since obtained grant models, so we have the funding to go forward. Any more funding would be terrific at this point, but we have funding to go forward. We're just a little concerned to make sure that we get the authorization because it comes, Appropriations Act, if I'm correct, it came through. And which is how Chesterfield did it too, and I think who else has, a couple of them have them.
Loudon has one, and I believe Winchester is the other one, yeah.
We're just a little unusual in what Dr. Saltner was able to create was the regional concept to get more funding for us. And we wanted to be able to do that, we wanted every school division that was providing the funding to have a seat at the table. We spent some time with VDOE, they're balking at the idea, they're just not used to doing it. We believe it falls within the statute, so one course would be to clarify in the statute. The easier course is just to get another appropriation, say, yeah, you're okay to go, which they've done with Chesterfield. They've allowed Chesterfield because Chesterfield was the first region recovery school. So that's the easiest way to do it. If we can just clarify in the future, I think it's a good model for other localities to use to access their different region schools to get into their opioid abatement funding. So one is, I think the easiest way was just please authorize us to continue. If you're not willing to do that, would you at least change and clarify in the statute that what we're doing falls under the definition of a joint school.
So that's it. So asking to change the statute is part of this, but would we just ask for that anyway for future?
Yeah, we spent some time with VDOE, and I'll be honest, VDOE is a mess right now. So so this is like not a high priority topic for them.
Right.
So the easiest thing for us is just have the General Assembly authorize us to continue functioning the way we're functioning. For the entire benefit of the entire Commonwealth, it would probably be easier to clarify that what is a region. What does the recovery school fall into? A region recovery school. What is it defined for EDOP purposes? But for our purposes, either one works. The quicker one is the appropriations
Right.
authorization.
But would the change in the statute have to go through VDOE or the General Assembly
It would go through the General Assembly, but they're gonna look to VDOE, and
for guidance.
VDOE, I've been trying to work with them, they're just kind of avoiding the issue, it's not that hard an issue for them. They just told us, well, you don't need us to get involved because you already have authorization, which we can live with that, it'd just be cleaner over the long run, but, we put it out there for them to think about. If they just say, keep running your school, you're doing great, that's good enough for us.
And Ms. Dwyer, I think to your point as well, as the program continues to grow, and we have more interest on a regional basis, we very well might be going back to the General Assembly to ask for additional funding to make sure that the program is sustainable in the long term. And the General Assembly has already set a precedent of helping these programs exist in the long term as well, so. Moving on to other legislative issues, we have had school bus driver shortage on our agenda for several years now. I have left it in there for discussion, whether this continues to be a challenge for us or not. But that is something that we have talked about. One of the chief challenges, though, I think is really more, might be more of a federal issue, based upon how CDLs work. But this is something that we've had in our journals and our legislative package for a couple of years now, and so that is language that you have seen previously. Moving down to unfunded mandates, again, Ms. Matheson sent around the unfunded mandate list recently. Those remain, as always, a significant challenge, and I think those sometimes are also candidly quite closely tied to some of the teacher recruitment and retention issues, because a lot of those unfunded mandates generally also put additional burdens on teachers. So not only is that about trying to stop additional unfunded mandates, but also looking at that list and figuring out what are the things that we might want to go after specifically in terms of either funding or eliminating those specific mandates.
So my question goes back to a discussion we had, last meeting, and I think in our September meeting, with regards to, do we reach out to some of our surrounding school divisions to see if we could champion one together? And that may be more of a question down the road for Dr. Robertson, because I'm sure there's a common item where we all struggle with, and since there typically is power in numbers, I mean, what are your thoughts, Dr. Robertson? We're gonna take advantage of you being with us this morning, so thank you.
So that is also on the vast legislative agenda, which is for the entire state.
Okay.
If this guy, one thing I might add to that is, several years ago, we worked to champion legislation to establish the School Health Services Committee, which has been a bicameral, bipartisan work group that meets throughout the year. One of the intents of that, establishing that, was to have a place to study some of these unfunded mandates specifically related to health services that schools are required to provide. And so, for example, that group spent this entire off-season of the General Assembly session to look at diabetes legislation that was proposed last year. And so, as we look at the unfunded mandate list, one of the possibilities would be to focus on some of those more healthcare-related issues and to get the School Health Services Committee to take a deep dive on some of those issues and decide whether are these things that schools should be doing, and if they should be doing it, are we doing it the appropriate way? And if we're doing it the appropriate way, should the General Assembly be providing dollars to help offset those costs? So that might be a good place to start on some of those, in terms of moving the needle on some of those unfunded mandates.
Thank you.
And I also, the unfunded mandates are like almost 3 pages long. So Dr. Robertson, I think the idea of talking to some of the regional schools around us would just be to prioritize some of those. What's our most important, what we want to get collectively in Hampton Roads as a priority of having them look at that's unfunded? Because there are so many, there's so many unfunded mandates. What's our priority? What's their priority? Can we have a common one and collectively say, this is our top unfunded mandate we want you to look at? Does that make sense?
I just want to inject, I think they're all important, so we could actually do both. I mean, they're all unfunded, so pick one and then include all of them as well.
Absolutely. And then finally, the last item that we have is assessment reform. We've been talking about assessment reform for a very long time. As we've talked about at our legislative committee meetings, as you will recall from last session, some significant legislation passed to make some process changes to how the SOLs are administered. This is outside of the SOL contract renewal, which is now started to begin at the state level, and outside some of the other things that are happening in terms of assessment reform. One of the challenges after that legislation passed and everybody took a deep breath after session, we realized that there were a number of logistical challenge with the way the law was drafted. And I think there's a lot of things where school divisions agree with the intent of what was trying to be accomplished, but the implementation is somewhat problematic. And so we're looking at how do we go and fix a number of those logistical challenges that were created through the legislation that was passed last year. The good news is that that legislation had what was called a delayed enactment clause, as you might recall, which means it does not go into effect for another year. And so having some discussions with both other school divisions and some members, I think there is an interest in going back and making a number of clarifying changes to the statute that was passed last year, specifically around last 2 weeks of testing. Right now, it very specifically says last 2 weeks of the school year. Clearly, this doesn't work if you have block scheduling because your assessments don't come at the last 2 weeks of the school year. So these are, there's a number of things like that that just really need to be fixed. There's a lot of discussion around SOLs counting for 10% of the grade. There are some logistical challenges around that as well, including what does 10% mean? I don't think school divisions exactly know how they're supposed to calculate that 10%. And since it is in statute that says 10% has to get calculated, what does that look like? I think one of the other challenges is that with a new SOL contract coming online here in the next, whenever that will be, what the SOLs look like today are not necessarily what the SOLs are going to look like tomorrow. And so making sure that if we're going to do 10% of the grade, that all those things are aligned appropriately. And so that's another place where I think we need to make some changes there. So this is, and then there was also changes that I think need to get clarified around IEPs and 504 plans. So again, these are, I think, primarily technical and clarifying in nature because we all want better process and reform on the SOLs. This tends to start to move in that direction, but again, some of the implementation issues that were created around, and this is just a product of legislation being talked about and decided on in a very quick process and session. We have kind of taken a deep breath and gone back and looked and said, okay, we need to fix a number of things in here.
One of the things also, if you want to just make a note, is there are definitely students in our school division who get the required SOL starting in middle school. And so by the time they get to high school, they're told, you just have to sit for the SOL. You don't necessarily have to pass the SOL. So then the 10% then comes to students who already have their science, have their social studies or math or whatever it is. They take the SOL and they don't do well, and now it affects their grade, even though they don't need that as a graduation requirement. So again, then they're taking off their, the 10% off their grade. It will affect possibly, their GPA, which could affect funding for them going forward for colleges. And it's not even something that they are required to sit for because they've already gotten their requirements.
And these are all parts of the discussion that I think we need to have, as we look back at what passed last year very closely and think about changes that we need to potentially make. Another one that comes to mind is, the legislation in an effort to reduce over testing, limits the number of assessments that can be given, but the way the language is drafted, and I don't think this was ever the intent, it could mean that you couldn't take AP tests. I don't think that's what anybody was intending to do, but that's another example of, we just need to go back through and make sure that if we're gonna put all this in statute and in the code, we need to make sure that it's very crystal clear of what this means for both school divisions and for students.
All right, thank you, Mr. Andrews.
Joe, I might have one more question. I wrote something down. Going back to teacher salary increases and recruitment and retention, has there been any movement on the General Assembly to do anything with that JLARC study that we all know was there? And your reaction tells me that it's like, that's a big ball of
So
wax.
as you recall, the Joint Legislative Audit Review Commission released a study in 2023
Right.
that made a number of significant recommendations as to how we fund K-12. Some of those have been implemented in terms of support cap was one of the recommendations. Additional supports for special ed and English language learners is another one that was, more money was put towards the last couple years in the General Assembly. At the same time, the legislature also established a joint subcommittee between the House and the Senate to continue studying these things and create a path forward. It has unfortunately always been overshadowed with other bigger issues that the General Assembly had to deal with immediately. And so those recommendations, unfortunately, can tend to kind of still sit out there without a lot of movement or action by the joint subcommittee. I hope that that joint subcommittee can get its feet under them again, and hopefully start making some more movement in terms of acting on some of those recommendations in terms of formula updates or whatever else that they want to tackle. But they have not made a lot of movement on some of the bigger, harder recommendations other than the things that we've already been talking about for the last couple of years.
Okay, I'm just wondering if there was even discussion. Thank
Yeah.
you.
Any more questions? All right, and Ms. Linetti, I just want to make sure I am following correct processes. At this time, do we need to take a vote on forwarding this proposed agenda to the full board?
Yes, and obviously with the intent that the administration will fill in the numbers that are missing. They have to get the final numbers as close as possible on special ed, but I would forward this to the school board. And then, is it 10th? I think it's the next
November
meeting. Yeah,
10th.
November 10th. Meeting.
Yes. All right, may I have a motion for forwarding our proposed agenda with the missing numbers included to the full board on at our November 10th meeting for information?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All right, we will make sure our colleagues receive this well before the November 10th board meeting, so they will have a chance to review it, because it will be included in the board packet that will be released next week. Is that correct, Ms. Linetti? That this will make the board packet, okay.
It should go out next Friday or next Thursday.
Okay. We are now in item 6, any other business? Okay, we don't have any other business. Our next meeting, first of all, our meeting that for the viewing public, our meeting that was scheduled for November 7th has been canceled, that we met a week early to ensure that we were able to finalize our legislative agenda in sufficient time for our November 10th meeting. And the documents will be, that we have voted to include in our school board packet for November 10th will be available for review when our board packet for November 10th is released to the public next week. Our next scheduled meeting will be on December 4th, which will be our legislative breakfast with our legislators at Bayside High School at 8:30 a.m. And our meeting after that for January will be January 9th, 2026, here in the school administration building at 9:30 a.m. May I have a motion for us to adjourn?
So moved?
I second. I just wanted to, but before I do, I'm sorry. So our proposal isn't finalized. We are presenting it to the board, correct?
Yes. You're good? Good. All right, we are adjourned.